Do you ever feel like you're living the same year over and over, just with a different calendar? You switch cities, partners, careers, yet the same suffocating feeling follows you like a shadow you can't outrun. The same arguments, the same quiet despair, the same sense that life is happening to you, not for you. Carl Jung, the architect of the modern psyche, didn't see this as bad luck or a run of poor choices. He saw it as evidence of a ghost in the machine. He believed you aren't just living your life, you are living your unconscious. And until you meet the part of you that has been running the show from the dark, you'll keep mistaking your inner prison for the real world. You think you see reality, but Jung claims you've never seen it directly. Everything you call life, every conflict, every person who grates on you, every emotion you can't control, is a projection from a film reel spinning in the basement of your mind. The tragedy isn't that you suffer. The tragedy is that you blame the world for a script written by your own hidden self. This isn't a lecture. This is an unveiling. If you can truly see what Jung saw, you'll understand why. For him, the moment you stop searching outside is the moment you finally start to live. The great misunderstanding. We are raised with a simple, brutal lie. That life is an external event. The world spins, things happen, and we are simply passengers reacting to the weather. When we feel pain, our reflex is surgical: remove the external cause. A bad job? Quit. A tense relationship? Leave. A vague sense of unhappiness? Move somewhere sunnier. But Jung diagnosed this reflex as the root of modern despair. For Jung, you don't experience reality. You experience your psychological interpretation of reality. Two people can stand in the exact same rain. One feels cleansed, the other feels drowned. The rain didn't change. The internal landscape did. When you ignore this, you treat your subjective mood as objective truth. You say, life is hard, when you mean, my mind is filtering life as hard. A friend of mine, let's call him Mark, spent a decade climbing the corporate ladder. From the outside, it was a straight line up: salary, status, stability. But inside, Mark felt a slow, creeping erosion of self. He changed teams. He changed companies. He even changed industries. The emptiness followed him like a stray dog. Jung would say Mark wasn't failing at life. He was succeeding at adaptation while failing at living. There's a difference. Adaptation is about fitting into the external machine. Living is about connecting to the internal source. When those two are out of alignment, you don't get a dramatic crash. You get a quiet drain. You function, but you aren't there. You mistake this for burnout, for the cost of adulthood. But Jung saw it as a cry from the depths. Imagine you're navigating by a map someone else drew. The roads are paved, the destinations are marked, and you make good time. But the map was never yours. The landmarks don't resonate. You aren't lost in the practical sense, but you feel a profound dislocation. You've confused the map of social expectation with the territory of your own soul. Jung offers a reversal here, not a remedy. He says your vision clears not when you look further ahead, but when you look inward. This isn't feel-good advice. It's a relocation of the problem. When the camera angle is wrong, the whole movie is distorted. We are experts at optimizing our cages, but we've never been taught to notice the cage itself. So when life feels wrong, we try to renovate the room instead of asking who is living in it. The invitation isn't to change your life. It's to change how you understand it. Once you realize life is a mirror, you stop fighting the reflection and start examining the face that's making it. The unneutral world. When the idea that life is purely out there begins to crack, a stranger truth emerges. The world is not a neutral backdrop. It is a responsive projection. Jung posited that we are not born as blank slates. We are born with a preformed inner world that dictates how the outer world will appear. There is no such thing as raw, objective experience. Every sensation, every interaction, is filtered through the lens of the unconscious before it ever reaches your conscious mind. You don't see the world as it is, you see it as you are. This is why the same room can feel like a sanctuary to one person and a prison to another. Why a simple comment can wound one person and bounce off another. The stimulus is identical. The experience is different. Jung called this psychological reality, the world you actually inhabit, regardless of what the facts say. If a deep, unconscious fear lives in you, the world will feel dangerous. If a sense of unworthiness is your baseline, every neutral glance will feel like judgment. When you say, "My life is chaotic," you are not just describing events. You are describing the structure of your own psyche. Consider the ancient story of Cain. He and his brother both offer a gift. One is accepted, one is not. The external event is simple. But for Cain, the world immediately splits. His brother transforms from sibling to rival. The landscape becomes hostile. Jung would not blame God or circumstance. He would point to the shadow within Cain, the jealousy, the sense of lack that was activated. The world wasn't the problem. Cain's inner world had become a battlefield, and he was fighting it on the outside. Modern life is no different. You enter every situation with a silent cargo hold full of expectations, fears, and assumptions. This cargo determines the weather of your experience. One workplace is a place of growth. Another, with the same job description, is a place of suffocation. The difference isn't the walls, it's the person walking through them. Jung believed that most of our suffering isn't caused by events, but by the way events strike our unconscious complexes. Your disproportionate anger isn't proof the world is too aggressive. It's a clue that something inside you is screaming to be heard. He wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Not because others are always wrong, but because your reaction is a diagnostic tool. Think of a dream. In a dream, you are immersed in a world of people, places, and threats that feel absolutely real. You react with genuine fear, genuine desire. Jung said waking life is the same dream, just better disguised. The projector is still running, but you've convinced yourself the images on the screen are coming from outside. This shifts every question you can ask. It's no longer, why does this keep happening to me? But what part of me is magnetized to this pattern? It's no longer, why is the world so hard? But what in the way I enter the world makes it feel this hard? Jung doesn't give answers, because the answers are personal. He just points the flashlight in a different direction. This isn't about turning life into a therapy session. It's about a single beat of attention. When you react strongly, pause. Ask, what in me is being touched? Not to fix it, just to see that the world you are reacting to is, in part, a world you are creating. Simply knowing this changes your inner position. The world may not change immediately, but your role in it does. The loudspeakers of the soul. If the world is a mirror, then the reflections that stir the most emotion are the most important. Why do certain personalities instantly provoke you? Why are you inexplicably drawn to others? For Jung, there are no random strong emotions. Intense hatred and intense longing are not about the people they're aimed at. They are broadcast signals from your own suppressed self. He called this the shadow and projection. A viewer once wrote in, saying, "I can't stand people who are effortlessly confident. They make my blood boil." They weren't asking for advice. They were reporting a reaction they couldn't control. Simply knowing this changes your inner position. The world may not change immediately, but your role in it does. The loudspeakers of the soul. If the world is a mirror, then the reflections that stir the most emotion are the most important. Why do certain personalities instantly provoke you? Why are you inexplicably drawn to others? For Jung, there are no random strong emotions. Intense hatred and intense longing are not about the people they're aimed at. They are broadcast signals from your own suppressed self. He called this the shadow and projection. A viewer once wrote in, saying, "I can't stand people who are effortlessly confident. They make my blood boil." They weren't asking for advice. They were reporting a reaction they couldn't control. Imagine your psyche as a house. You live in a few well-lit, comfortable rooms. The rest of the house, the rooms containing your anger, your hunger, your ambition, you've locked and forgotten. They aren't gone. They're just dark. When you meet someone who lives comfortably in one of those locked rooms, light leaks out, and you feel a jolt of either disgust or fascination. The world is just the keyhole through which you see your own inner architecture. The goal is not to act on every impulse. If you crave freedom, it doesn't mean you should abandon your family. If you feel anger, it doesn't mean you should rage. Jung says, become conscious. When you recognize a strong reaction as a signal, you create a space between the emotion and the action. You stop being driven and start being informed. Your emotional world stops being an enemy and becomes a messenger. Every irritation is a letter. Every admiration is a postcard from a part of you asking to be visited. This is the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming whole. What you hate, and what you long for say very little about others and everything about you. When you stop fighting these signals and start listening, you don't become a different person. You become a more honest one. The shape-shifting problem. If your reactions are signals, then what about the problems that just won't die? This is the most frustrating pattern of all. You solve a problem, only to have it reappear in a new costume. You leave a job because you feel unappreciated, only to feel the same in the next one. You end a relationship because you feel smothered, only to find yourself in another dynamic that feels just as tight. The people change. The setting changes. The dialogue changes. But the emotional core of the problem remains identical. Jung refused to call this bad luck. He called it a complex. In his psychology, the unconscious doesn't lecture you. It doesn't send you a letter. It communicates through repetition, through emotion, through patterns that loop until you finally pay attention. When something vital in you remains unseen, it doesn't vanish. It shapeshifts. It finds new actors, new stages, but it performs the same old play. Literature illustrates this. In Camus' The Stranger, Massault drifts through life as if pulled by currents he doesn't understand. Events seem random, disconnected. But the thread holding them together is his profound disconnection from his own inner life. He isn't a victim of chance. He is a victim of his own unconscious pattern of detachment. Modern neuroscience, in its own language, confirms this. The brain builds superhighways for familiar responses. The reactions that once kept you safe or helped you fit in become the default route. You don't choose them anymore. They choose you. You can change the scenery all you want, but if the internal GPS is still set to the same destination, you will keep ending up in the same neighborhood. Jung didn't see repetition as failure. He saw it as an invitation. The unconscious doesn't repeat to punish you. It repeats to be recognized. He wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. When you only manage the surface symptoms, the root stays intact. It will send up new shoots. It will bloom again in a different season of your life. The pattern returns, not because you made the wrong move, but because the internal coordinates haven't been corrected. This explains the exhaustion of the self-improvement path. People read, learn, change strategies, but the background music of their life stays the same. They are trying to solve a basement problem with a roof repair. Jung's prescription is not to fight the pattern, but to finally see it. Each time the loop returns, it brings more data, more clarity. The question to ask is not, how do I get rid of this? But what in me is being activated by this pattern? The moment you ask that question, you are no longer fully inside the loop. You are standing slightly outside it, watching. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up, just pause for 60 seconds. Identify the background feeling you woke up with. That's your data. When a familiar irritation arises during the day, just whisper to yourself, pattern repeating. Don't change it. Just see it. For Jung, this act of noticing is the beginning of the end of the loop's power. And when you start seeing the pattern instead of being swept away by it, your role in your own life begins to shift. You are no longer the victim of the plot. You are becoming the observer of it. The quiet exit from victimhood. Do you notice it? A subtle shift in where you're standing as you listen? The problems haven't vanished. The world hasn't softened. But your inner position has tilted. This is the pivot point Jung identified as the real turning of the tide. It's not about fighting the victim. It's about no longer being the victim. In Jungian terms, the victim isn't an identity. It's a position. From that position, everything comes from outside. Circumstances assault you. People wound you. The past determines you. And here's the crucial distinction Jung makes. The pain is real. The wounds are real. He never denied that. But he separated the experience of suffering from the construction of an identity around suffering. When you start to see yourself primarily as someone to whom things are done, you quietly hand over the keys to your life. You give your power to the past, to the perpetrator, to fate. This plays out in daily life. Someone tells the story of their unfair treatment, at work, in childhood, in love, over and over. Every detail is true. Every emotion is justified. But with each retelling, they shrink. Not because the story is false, but because they are reinforcing the position of the one who was acted upon. They are cementing themselves in the role of the object, not the subject, of their own life. Jung didn't see this as a moral failing. He saw it as a stage. The moment you stop playing the victim isn't the moment you deny the past. It's the moment you realize that while you couldn't control what happened to you, you are responsible for how you continue to carry it. He wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." This isn't toxic positivity. It's a surgical separation of past event from present identity. Leaving the victim role is rarely dramatic. It's a quiet morning when you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start noticing, "What is my relationship to this now?" This question doesn't blame. It doesn't avoid. It simply returns you to the driver's seat. Jung emphasized that this is not about self-blame. It's about reclaiming the portion of psychological responsibility that is yours. You are not responsible for the wound, but you are responsible for how it continues to live in you, guiding your choices, coloring your reactions, shaping your self-image. In the victim position, the past is always louder than the present. What happened keeps shouting, drowning out what is. When you step out, the present slowly turns up its volume. You still remember, you still feel, but you no longer live from memory. You live with it. Imagine a room where you've kept the curtains drawn for years because the light outside once felt too harsh. The darkness protected you, but at some point, it stopped being a shelter and became a cell. Leaving the victim role isn't about smashing the windows. It's about pulling the curtain aside an inch. The light doesn't flood in all at once, but you now know you aren't as trapped as you believed. In practical terms, this begins with noticing. You catch yourself telling the old story in the old tone. You see yourself reacting the old way in a new situation. And this time, instead of fully sinking into it, there's a pause. A microsecond of space. In that space, you don't need to change anything. You just need to recognize the role you're stepping into. That recognition alone is the first step out. The core lesson isn't about becoming stronger. It's about becoming more truthful. When you stop fully identifying as the victim, life doesn't suddenly become easy, but it becomes yours. You are no longer just the one being acted upon. You become the one in dialogue with your history. And from that position, something Jung always pointed toward, inner freedom, finally has room to breathe. Before we move on, just take a breath. Don't analyze. Don't conclude. Just feel where you are standing right now. Sometimes simply stopping and realizing you're not entirely in the old role is a deeper shift than any external change. The end of the search. At this threshold, something changes quietly. You no longer feel the desperate need to chase the next answer. Not because there's nothing left to learn, but because you're no longer searching from a place of lack. For Jung, this is the overlooked destination. It's not marked by fireworks. It's not an achievement you can frame. It's a subtle reorientation. People search when they believe the thing they need is ahead of them, a new philosophy, a better technique, a secret revealed. But Jung saw the deeper engine of searching as disconnection from the self. When you can't feel your own center, you grasp for external anchors. And when that center is restored, the compulsive searching naturally subsides. Think of an athlete like Michael Jordan. Early in his career, he played with a fire born of proving himself. He had to score, to win, to dominate. But after his first setbacks, something shifted. He stopped playing to prove he was the greatest. He started playing from a deeper place, discipline, rhythm, the cohesion of the team. The stats came, but they came as a byproduct, not a goal. From a Jungian view, he had moved from an ego-driven search for validation to a self-driven expression of mastery. Jung called this stabilizing center the self. Not the social mask you wear, but the deeper axis around which all the conflicting parts of you can orbit. When you haven't touched the self, you search to fill a void. When you touch it, the search changes quality. You no longer search to escape emptiness. You search as a form of dialogue with what is already there. And sometimes, the dialogue itself becomes the destination. He wrote, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." This isn't a rejection of the world. It's a reordering of priority. When you stop living entirely through the outward gaze, searching, consuming, proving, consciousness dawns. Not with a bang, but with the quiet feeling that you are finally in the right room. At this stage, your relationship with knowledge itself changes. You feel less urgency to collect ideas. You feel less pressure to immediately apply what you learn. You allow yourself to slow down so that what resonates can actually sink in. If something doesn't touch you, you let it go. If it touches you, you give it time. Jung saw this rhythm as a sign of maturing consciousness. In a culture that worships forward motion, this state looks like stagnation. But Jung saw it differently. He believed many growth journeys are sophisticated versions of running in place, constant movement designed to avoid the terror of standing still. When you fear inner silence, you will always invent a new goal. Not because it's meaningful, but because stopping feels like falling. Only when searching is no longer compulsive do you begin to live from the inside out. You still work, you still create, you still learn. But you no longer let those things define your worth. You no longer search to become the correct version of yourself. You begin living consciously as yourself, messy, inconsistent, and real. Picture it like adjusting a chair. At first, you're constantly shifting, up, down, forward, back, because something feels off. But once the height is right, you forget about the chair. You're just sitting, working, present. The adjusting phase was necessary, but staying in it would only pull you away from the work itself. From Jung's perspective, this quieting of the search shows that individuation has ripened. You are no longer living as someone who lacks. You are living as someone in dialogue with themselves. This doesn't make life easier, but it makes life real. You're no longer chasing the path. You're walking it. Over the next few days, try this. Whenever you feel the urge to look for another answer outside, just pause for one beat. Notice what is pushing that search. Then, if you still want to search, do it from that conscious place. When searching is no longer necessary, it isn't because you have all the answers. It's because you no longer lose yourself while looking for them. If you're standing here, you understand why Jung believed that at some point, the path is no longer something you hunt for. It's something that opens, step by step, from the very center of your inner life. Conclusion. So here we are. And perhaps what remains isn't a final answer, but a different kind of quiet. A less frantic way of seeing yourself. The urge to fix, to solve, to rush, it softens. Behind every experience, something has been waiting, not to be defeated, just to be seen. Carl Jung never asked for followers. He only asked for courage. The courage to look where you've been trained to look away. When you stop chasing to fill a hole, stop searching to feel safe, and simply begin listening, honestly, to what moves within you, the conflicts don't all vanish. But they quiet. Not because they're gone, but because you are no longer living separated from yourself. If what you've heard here has touched you in your own way, maybe this isn't the last video you need to watch. Maybe it's the moment you no longer watch in order to search. And if you want to stay in this space, not for more answers, but to practice the art of staying still long enough to become what you've been looking for, then like this video and subscribe to Winds of Thought.